Chicago, Illinois, November 2025. A cold wind swept across the parking deck of St. Catherine Medical Center, rattling loose metal signs and pushing sheets of rain against the glass walls of the intensive care tower. Inside, the hospital was running beyond capacity. Ambulances had arrived every 15 minutes since dawn. Nurses moved quickly between rooms, respiratory therapists adjusted ventilators, and exhausted residents hurried through corridors carrying tablets and stacks of lab results. For Nurse Emily Brooks, it should have been just another difficult shift. But at 6:42 a.m., while reviewing overnight reports, she noticed something that made her stop typing. Patient, Harold Bennett, age 67. Cardiac arrest. Unexpected deterioration. Resuscitation unsuccessful. Emily frowned. Bennett had been stable when she handed him off to the night team. His oxygen requirements were improving, his blood pressure was controlled, and the attending physician had discussed moving him out of intensive care later that day. Yet he was dead. And he was the fifth patient in 6 months to die under nearly identical circumstances. Each case had been reviewed by the hospital's internal safety committee. Each chart appeared complete. Each death had been classified as natural. No medication errors. No equipment failures. No staff misconduct. Emily had accepted the first 2 deaths as tragic coincidences. By the 5th, coincidence no longer felt like an answer. That evening, after her shift ended, she sat alone in the staff lounge with a notebook she had started keeping in secret. She wrote down every unexplained death, every medication administered during the final hours, every staff member on duty, and every unusual event. One name appeared repeatedly: Jonathan Mercer, the hospital's operations director. Mercer was not a physician. He was not a nurse. His job involved budgets, facilities, and vendor contracts. Yet security logs showed that he frequently entered the ICU after midnight, long after administrative offices had closed. Emily asked her supervisor about it. He's reviewing operations. A week later, she asked again. He's checking equipment upgrades. The 3rd time, the supervisor closed the office door before answering. If you value your career, stop asking questions. The warning sent a chill through her. From that moment on, Emily stopped asking questions out loud. Instead, she began collecting information quietly. She copied shift schedules. She photographed maintenance logs. She recorded medication inventory numbers in her notebook. She never removed original documents from the hospital. She simply preserved details she feared might disappear. 2 months later, another patient died. This time, the hospital's security cameras malfunctioned for exactly 11 minutes. The timing was almost perfect. Almost. A newly installed hallway camera on a separate system continued recording. Emily accessed the footage while helping security staff review the outage. At 2:17 a.m., Jonathan Mercer entered a restricted corridor leading to the medication storage area and several ICU supply rooms. He remained there for 14 minutes. Hospital records later stated that Mercer had been attending an administrative meeting in another building at that exact time. Someone was lying. Emily copied the video onto an encrypted flash drive. For 3 days, she carried it in her coat pocket, unsure what to do. Then she mailed it anonymously to the Chicago Police Department. 3 weeks passed with no response. Emily began to wonder if the package had been lost. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, 2 strangers appeared at the nurse's station. They wore plain suits and introduced themselves as Detective Marcus Reed and Detective Elena Vasquez. What surprised Emily was not their presence. It was their division. Financial Crimes Task Force. We'd like to ask a few questions about hospital purchasing. Procedures, Reed said. Emily blinked. Purchasing. Medical equipment, vendor approvals, replacement contracts, Vasquez added. Emily had expected homicide detectives. Instead, they were asking about invoices. Over the next hour, the detectives revealed only fragments of what they knew. St. Catherine had recently spent $48 million replacing monitoring systems, infusion pumps, and respiratory equipment that independent engineers believed still had years of service life remaining. The invoices looked legitimate. The payments did not. Several vendor companies existed only on paper. Money flowed through shell corporations before ending up in offshore accounts connected to individuals tied to Jonathan Mercer. Emily felt her stomach tighten. "Are you saying the equipment is fake?" Reed exchanged a glance with Vasquez. "We're saying we don't yet know what was installed in this hospital." That afternoon, after the detectives left, Emily noticed Mercer watching her from the far end of the corridor. He smiled politely. Too politely. Then he turned and walked away. For the first time, Emily wondered if he knew someone inside the hospital had contacted the police. What she did not know was that the detectives had already opened a confidential federal investigation. Its codename was Operation Duet. And before the week was over, investigators would discover that the suspicious deaths were only the surface of a conspiracy that reached far beyond a single hospital administrator. The following Monday, Emily Brooks arrived for her shift an hour early. She wasn't there to prepare patient charts. She wanted to see something that had been bothering her for weeks. Maintenance crews had been replacing infusion pumps throughout the intensive care unit, yet many of the new machines already showed signs of wear. Small scratches covered their plastic casings, and several serial number labels looked as though they had been peeled off and replaced. Emily quietly wrote down every serial number she could find. Later that afternoon, she entered them into the hospital's inventory database. Her heart began to race. Several machines shared identical serial numbers. That shouldn't have been possible. Every medical device manufactured in the United States carries a unique identification number. Someone had duplicated them. That evening, Detective Marcus Reed received a call from the FBI forensic accounting team. "We've traced another payment." "To Mercer?" "No. To someone much higher." Reed sat upright. "Who?" "The chairman of Medcore Solutions." Medcore Solutions was the company responsible for supplying nearly all of St. Catherine Medical Center's new equipment. On paper, it was one of the country's fastest-growing medical technology firms. Behind the scenes, investigators had discovered something very different. The company owned no manufacturing plants, no warehouses, no production facilities. It existed primarily as a middleman. Millions of dollars entered its accounts. Millions disappeared overseas. The next morning, Operation Duet officially expanded. Federal prosecutors approved search warrants for financial records belonging to Medcore Solutions and 3 affiliated corporations. FBI agents quietly collected thousands of emails, contracts, and banking transactions without alerting hospital executives. Within days, forensic analysts noticed an unusual pattern. Every major equipment purchase had been approved during emergency board meetings. Minutes from those meetings appeared genuine. But digital metadata revealed they had been created weeks after the supposed meetings took place. Someone had forged official records. Meanwhile, Emily noticed another disturbing change. Jonathan Mercer had become unusually interested in staff schedules. He personally requested lists of every nurse assigned to the ICU. He reviewed badge access logs. He even questioned supervisors about employees staying late after shifts. Emily kept her concerns to herself. She began leaving the hospital through different exits every evening. Twice she noticed the same black SUV parked across the street. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it wasn't. Late Friday night, Emily's apartment doorbell rang. She looked through the peephole. No one was there. When she opened the door, she found a plain white envelope lying on the floor. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature. No fingerprints. Only 6 typed words. "Stop looking or someone gets hurt." Emily's hands trembled. She immediately called Detective Reed. Within 30 minutes, Reed and Detective Elena Vasquez arrived. They photographed the letter and collected it as evidence. "You did the right thing," Reed said. Emily looked frightened. "Do you think they're watching me?" Reed didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked another question. "Has anyone besides us known you've been asking questions?" Emily thought carefully. "My supervisor." "And Jonathan Mercer." Reed exchanged a concerned look with Vasquez. That answer narrowed the list considerably. The following week, Operation Duet uncovered its biggest breakthrough yet. Digital forensic specialists recovered deleted emails from Medcore Solutions' secure servers. Most had been erased months earlier. One message caught everyone's attention. From * Jonathan Mercer. Subject * equipment rotation. * replace all original monitoring units before the annual inspection. Destroy removed inventory immediately. *. Another reply arrived minutes later. * What about the failed devices? * Mercer's response was chilling. * Classify them as maintenance losses. * Investigators immediately contacted biomedical engineers. If defective equipment had been intentionally hidden, every unexplained patient death would have to be re-examined. At the same time, another witness came forward. His name was Daniel Ortiz. For 12 years, he had worked as a biomedical technician inside St. Catherine Medical Center. Daniel admitted he had resigned suddenly 8 months earlier. "I couldn't live with it anymore," he told investigators. He explained that Mercer had repeatedly ordered technicians to ignore equipment failures and falsify maintenance reports. Whenever Daniel protested, Mercer reminded him how easily employees could lose their jobs. Detective Vasquez asked the obvious question. "Why didn't you report him?" Daniel lowered his head. "I was afraid." With Daniel's testimony, investigators finally obtained enough evidence to request covert surveillance of Jonathan Mercer. For 2 weeks, agents tracked every movement. Most days appeared ordinary. Board meetings, vendor lunches, administrative offices. Then, one Thursday night, Mercer drove somewhere unexpected. Instead of going home, he stopped at an abandoned warehouse near the Chicago River. FBI surveillance teams watched from a distance. A delivery truck arrived minutes later. Several wooden crates were unloaded into the warehouse. None carried medical company markings. Agents photographed every license plate, every face, every shipment. A search of transportation records revealed the truck had never been registered to MedCore Solutions. Instead, it belonged to another shell company already under federal investigation. Operation Duet was growing larger by the day. The following morning, Emily walked into the ICU and froze. The infusion pump assigned to one of her patients displayed an unfamiliar software version. Hospital policy required every update to be documented. There was no documentation. She unplugged the machine and requested a replacement. Later that afternoon, FBI engineers secretly examined it. Their findings shocked everyone. The pump contained unauthorized hardware modifications that bypassed several built-in safety systems. It had never been approved by federal regulators. Someone had deliberately altered critical medical equipment inside an American hospital. The conspiracy was no longer just about fraud. It had become a threat to patient safety. As Detective Reed stared at the engineering report, he quietly said, "We're not chasing stolen money anymore. We're chasing the people willing to risk lives to protect it." Operation Duet had just entered its most dangerous phase. The engineering report reached federal prosecutors before sunrise. Within hours, an emergency meeting was held inside the Chicago FBI field office. Around the conference table sat detectives, FBI agents, forensic accountants, biomedical engineers, and representatives from the Department of Health and Human Services. Special Agent Rebecca Collins stood before a digital evidence board filled with photographs, financial records, and surveillance images. She drew a line connecting Jonathan Mercer to MedCore Solutions, then another to 4 shell corporations. Finally, she connected those companies to offshore bank accounts containing nearly $96 million in suspicious transfers. "We're looking at organized healthcare fraud," she said. "But there's something bigger." She displayed another photograph. The abandoned warehouse near the Chicago River. "Last night we watched Mercer receive another shipment. The crates weren't medical supplies. They contained refurbished equipment with counterfeit certification labels." The room fell silent. Instead of replacing aging hospital equipment with new devices, someone had been buying discarded machines, modifying them, placing counterfeit inspection stickers on them, and billing hospitals for brand new equipment. Patients believed they were being treated with modern technology. Many were not. Federal Judge Elaine Porter approved search warrants immediately. But Agent Collins insisted on waiting. "If we move today," she explained, "we'll arrest Mercer. If we wait another 48 hours, we may identify everyone above him. It was a risky decision. The investigation continued. Meanwhile, Emily Brooks struggled to concentrate at work. The anonymous threat still haunted her. Every unfamiliar face in the hallway made her nervous. Every unexpected phone call caused her heart to race. Late one evening, she noticed something unusual. Jonathan Mercer wasn't heading toward the administrative offices. He entered the hospital archives in the basement. The records department had closed hours earlier. Curious, Emily quietly followed from a distance. Mercer unlocked a secure records room using an executive access card. He disappeared inside. 5 minutes later, smoke began drifting beneath the door. Emily immediately pulled the fire alarm. Hospital staff rushed toward the basement carrying extinguishers. Mercer emerged coughing, claiming an electrical panel had malfunctioned. Firefighters quickly extinguished the blaze. The damage appeared minor. But once investigators examined the room, they realized the fire hadn't started near the electrical equipment. It had started inside a filing cabinet. Someone had attempted to destroy decades of archived purchasing records. Fortunately, the sprinkler system activated before the documents were completely burned. Detective Marcus Reed arrived within an hour. Forensic specialists carefully collected the damaged files. Although many pages were blackened around the edges, most remained readable. Among them was a contract dated 8 years earlier. It authorized the purchase of over 200 intensive care monitors. The signature approving the purchase belonged to someone who had retired 3 years before the document was supposedly signed. Another forgery. That same night, FBI cyber specialists made another discovery. Using recovered server backups, they reconstructed deleted communications between hospital executives. One message immediately caught Agent Collins' attention. Operation Duet enters Phase 2 next month. Destroy all warehouse inventory before auditors arrive. Attached was a list of locations. 3 warehouses. 2 storage facilities. 1 private airfield outside Chicago. Operation Duet wasn't just the investigators' code name. It had been the conspirators' internal project name all along. The following morning, surveillance teams observed unusual activity. Trucks began leaving every warehouse listed in the recovered email. Agents followed each vehicle without intervening. One convoy headed toward an industrial recycling center. Instead of delivering scrap equipment, workers began crushing hospital monitors and infusion pumps before investigators could inspect them. Agent Collins finally gave the order. Move. FBI vehicles surrounded the facility. Workers froze. Several attempted to flee. None escaped. Inside the warehouse, investigators found hundreds of medical devices stacked floor to ceiling. Many carried counterfeit certification labels. Others still displayed inventory tags belonging to hospitals across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. The conspiracy stretched far beyond St. Catherine Medical Center. Jonathan Mercer watched live news coverage from his office. His face remained calm. But inside, panic was growing. He opened a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. Inside sat a laptop no one knew existed. Encrypted financial records. Private communications. Payment schedules. Everything tying senior executives to Operation Duet. Mercer hesitated. If investigators found the computer, everyone would fall. His phone suddenly rang. A distorted voice spoke only one sentence. They know about the laptop. The line disconnected. Mercer immediately grabbed the computer and rushed toward the underground parking garage. What he didn't realize was that FBI surveillance teams had been watching every entrance to the hospital since dawn. Agent Collins saw Mercer carrying the black laptop case. There he is. Mercer climbed into a sedan and sped out of the garage. Police vehicles followed at a distance. The pursuit remained quiet. No sirens. No flashing lights. Agents wanted Mercer to lead them to whoever was waiting for him. Instead of driving home, Mercer headed toward Chicago's waterfront. He parked beside an abandoned shipping terminal and stepped out carrying the laptop. A second vehicle arrived moments later. A silver SUV. A well-dressed man stepped out. Mercer handed him the computer. Before the exchange could finish, Federal agents. Don't move. The terminal exploded into motion. Mercer froze. The second man jumped back into the SUV and accelerated toward the exit. FBI vehicles blocked the main gate. The SUV smashed through a chain-link fence and sped onto a service road. Agent Collins climbed into her vehicle. He's running. The chase had begun. The silver SUV raced through the deserted industrial district along Chicago's waterfront, weaving between shipping containers and abandoned warehouses. Special Agent Rebecca Collins stayed close behind. Unit 3, block the eastern exit. Unit 5, cover the bridge. Police helicopters soon joined the pursuit, their searchlights sweeping across the dark streets below. The driver ignored every opportunity to surrender. Instead, he accelerated toward the old freight terminal overlooking the Chicago River. Suddenly, the SUV swerved into an empty loading dock. The driver abandoned the vehicle and disappeared inside the massive warehouse. Within seconds, FBI agents surrounded the building. "Nobody enters or leaves without my order," Collins instructed over the radio. Tactical officers moved carefully through the dimly lit warehouse. Rows of wooden crates stretched into the darkness. Some contained hospital beds. Others held unopened boxes of counterfeit medical equipment. Then an agent shouted, "Movement on the second floor." The suspect sprinted across a narrow metal walkway. Collins pursued him. At the far end of the warehouse, the man found himself trapped against a locked emergency exit. He slowly raised his hands. "I surrender." Agents placed him in handcuffs. His identification shocked everyone. Michael Grayson, Chief Executive Officer of MedCore Solutions. The man investigators believed had remained safely behind the scenes throughout the conspiracy. Back at FBI headquarters, Jonathan Mercer and Michael Grayson were questioned separately. Mercer refused to speak. Grayson remained equally silent. Then Agent Collins placed the recovered laptop on the interrogation table. "We've already accessed it." Grayson looked surprised. "That's impossible. Our cyber team decrypted everything." It wasn't entirely true. The encryption had not yet been broken. But Grayson believed it. He lowered his head. After several minutes of silence, he quietly said, "It started as accounting fraud. Then it became something much worse." Over the next 2 days, Grayson provided investigators with hundreds of pages of internal documents. He explained that MedCore Solutions had secretly purchased outdated medical equipment from hospitals scheduled for demolition. Technicians cleaned, repainted, and modified the devices before applying counterfeit certification labels. Hospitals were then charged full price for supposedly brand new equipment. The profits were enormous. As more hospitals joined the purchasing program, executives realized routine inspections might expose the fraud. Maintenance reports were altered. Inspection dates were falsified. Defective equipment was quietly moved from one hospital to another instead of being repaired. Most devices continued functioning. Some failed. Several failures contributed to patient deaths. Although no evidence showed the conspirators intended to harm patients, prosecutors argued they knowingly ignored deadly risks to protect millions of dollars in illegal profits. Federal investigators executed additional search warrants across 4 states. Warehouses in Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan contained thousands of counterfeit replacement parts. Engineers discovered falsified safety certificates bearing forged federal approval stamps. Financial analysts traced more than $180 million through offshore corporations over nearly a decade. Operation Duet had evolved into one of the largest healthcare fraud investigations in American history. Months later, the federal trial began. The courtroom remained filled every day with reporters, former hospital employees, and families whose loved ones had received treatment using compromised equipment. Prosecutors presented weeks of testimony. Cyber experts explained how deleted emails had been recovered. Forensic accountants traced the money. Biomedical engineers demonstrated the differences between authentic medical devices and the counterfeit equipment installed in hospitals. The jury listened carefully as Emily Brooks took the witness stand. She described the unexplained patient deaths, the late-night visits by Jonathan Mercer, the altered maintenance records, the anonymous threat left outside her apartment. Defense attorneys argued Emily had misinterpreted ordinary hospital procedures. But every claim was contradicted by documents, surveillance footage, and witness testimony. One by one, former employees admitted they had remained silent because they feared losing their jobs. Some accepted plea agreements. Others apologized publicly to affected families. Near the end of the trial, prosecutors played a recovered audio recording from a meeting between MedCorp executives. Jonathan Mercer's voice could be heard saying, "If inspectors discover the equipment before the contracts are renewed, everything falls apart." Another executive replied, "Then make sure they never discover it." The courtroom fell silent. It became one of the trial's most powerful moments. After 6 days of deliberation, the jury returned. Everyone stood. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson read the verdict. On charges of healthcare fraud, guilty. On conspiracy to commit wire fraud, guilty. On obstruction of justice, guilty. On multiple counts of document falsification and financial crimes, guilty. Jonathan Mercer lowered his head. Michael Grayson closed his eyes. Neither showed any emotion as federal marshals escorted them from the courtroom. Several months later, St. Catherine Medical Center completed a complete overhaul of its procurement system. Independent safety inspectors reviewed every medical device. New whistleblower protections encouraged employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. Hospitals across the country adopted stricter verification procedures for purchased medical equipment. The investigation led to nationwide reforms that strengthened oversight of hospital supply chains. Emily Brooks quietly returned to nursing. She declined book deals. She refused television interviews. When colleagues asked why she had risked everything, she smiled gently. "I didn't start taking notes because I wanted to expose a conspiracy. I started because something didn't feel right." Patients trust us with their lives. That trust is worth protecting. 1 year later, Agent Rebecca Collins visited the now-empty warehouse where the investigation had reached its turning point. The crates were gone. The lights were off. The building was scheduled for demolition. She looked around the vast, silent room and reflected on the case. The conspiracy had hidden behind paperwork. Instead of masks. Behind boardrooms instead of dark alleyways. Behind business suits instead of disguises. It had taken one observant nurse, one anonymous package, and hundreds of hours of patient investigative work to uncover the truth. Before leaving, Collins locked the warehouse door one final time. Operation Duet was officially closed. Justice had not erased the suffering caused by greed and deception, but it had ensured that those responsible were held accountable and that the lessons learned would help protect patients in the future.